When last we were discussing, I was trying to justify why decision trees are models and rather than decision-making tools. And in doing that, I don't want to give the wrong impression. These things are all mathematical tools, right? Is there a right way to use math? Of course not. You can do it, you can use it any way you want. And you see how we use neural networks to do planning, and yet neural networks are often also used for modeling. And similarly, decision trees can be tools for planning. You could use a decision tree over here for building a policy if you wanted to. And in fact, I have. I've done that in various applications. But in general, when we think about decision trees or neural nets or these various models, we think of them as learning models, as in for the application of machine learning. And I want to give you some intuition as to what that means and how that differs from planning. Because we spent most of the semester doing planning. What's the difference? When I think of learning, I think of looking back. Meaning we're going to consider the past and try to fit it all together and produce meaning out of it. And when I think of decision making or planning, I think we're very much looking forward in that we already have some concept of what we can do, what our choices are, and what will be the likely consequences of various actions. And to some extent, learning facilitates planning or decision making. Do you see what I'm saying there? I'm trying to suggest that, well, why do we do learning? Why even learn in the first place? What's the point? So you don't die, okay? Well, if you think about an end game, suppose it's the moment before you die. At that very moment, are you really focused on, hey, I should go back to school? Kind of not so much, right? Because usually you think of, hey, I want to learn a lot so that I can have a good life and I can go make good decisions and make a lot of money or something like that. Go maximize my utility or there's lots of ways to put it, but I think that when we're looking into the past and gathering data and making sense of the data and trying to build a model that understands that data, this is very much the looking back thing. And there's really only one real reason to do that. It's because we're trying to facilitate something else that allows us to look forward so that we can maximize something, profits or utility or preferences or decisions or whatever. Let's consider the brain for a minute. The frontal lobe of the cerebrum is apparently responsible for logic and reasoning that makes humans very able to make good decisions and makes us smart. But the cerebrum itself, this is the cortex, the layer on the top of the brain that's all rippled so that it can have more surface area. How does it work? No one knows for sure, but a lot of theories have been proposed, and one of them is that it's very much a pattern recognizing machine. So for example, if I give you a sequence, what number comes next? 27, correct. Obviously we all know the answer is 8 because this is a stupid and easy sequence. But that's not easy for creatures to solve that don't have a frontal lobe of the cerebrum. If I play a song to you, if it goes da 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 da. Thank you. I knew somebody would do it. Nobody can just sit there and listen to that without finishing the last note. And how do we know that's the true last note? Well, we kind of don't, but I mean, there's no way to know. It could have been anything. And yet, we've heard that sequence so many times. The cerebrum it recognizes temporal patterns. For example, everybody think about where you're sitting right now. Have you ever sat here before? If you're sitting in a place where you haven't sat before, raise your hand. Okay. We've got like 3 out of the whole class. The first time you walk into a room, don't you think about where you're going to sit? And you think, okay, I want to be near the exit, but I also don't want to be seen by the person who's giving the lecture. But then again, I don't want to be too crowded, or things go through your mind and you pick a seat. The next time you enter the room, what your mind does is it thinks to itself, hey, I don't want to put this much effort into it. I'm just going to default to what I did last time. I already have a pattern, so pattern, there I go, sit in the same seat. And you certainly heard the expression, humans are creatures of habit. Did I tell you the story about the snow? So I used to go to a school and I had to take this one class that was on the opposite side of a field. And so every day we'd walk across the field. Well, when it snowed, of course, people would all walk in the single file in this path because they didn't want to Well, so this is the school, and this is the building where I had my class, and people would all walk through the snow like this because they didn't want to wander around through the field and get snow all over their boots, right? So one day, I woke up a little bit early just because I'm kind of snarky like that, and I started walking around like this, and like this, and then like this, and then like this. And I wove the stupidest path I could find through the snow, and I was sure to, trudge up the snow really a lot so that people would save getting snow all over their boots to follow my path. So what do you think everybody did? Well, at first a few people started following the path because, hey, there was a don't get snow all over your feet path to get to the building. So they followed it. Pretty soon this became clearly the best path in the snow to get to the building, and soon there's a big line of people all walking around. Till, of course, one person says, that's stupid, I'm not doing that, and he plows through right here. Then, of course, everybody plowed through right there. So eventually the path kind of smoothed out. But still, for the next 3 months, everybody was walking a stupid path because I forged it on the first day of the first snow. Okay. What does that have to do with anything?
You're a jerk.
I'm a jerk, yes. In addition to me being a jerk, I also am aware that humans are creatures of habit and things work that way. That's kind of how the brain works, is you recognize patterns. When I'm talking, already in your head, there is something that's trying to anticipate every single word that I say. Why? Because if you can correctly anticipate my next word, then you understand what I'm saying, right? And if you don't, then what happens is it triggers some part of you and you think, whoa, that's not what I expected. Think, and then your mind has to adjust the internal representation of what's going on such that you do understand what I'm saying. Basically, every moment of every awareness that you have is training your mind to understand what's going on just a little bit more. Does that kind of make sense? Because every time you get it wrong, you adjust something, and every time you get it right, you think, yay, I understand, and you feel a little good, and you get a little bit of a dopamine rush, and it makes you think, hey, I'm totally on top of this. And have you ever been in a class, and everything the teacher says, you're just like, yeah, I get it, totally easy. But you like that situation, right? Well, that means that your mind is able to anticipate most of what he's saying. It doesn't mean you can foresee the future. Of course you can't, but if every little sequence makes sense to you, then your mind knows that it gets it, you're aware. And if your mind doesn't anticipate what happens, it's unaware. Okay, so imagine that you can make these temporal sequences. What would you do with it? Here's an example. Last night, I was laying in bed, my eyes were closed, and I was wandering through the fantasy land that you wander through when you're asleep, and I experienced a weird world in which I don't actually live. But do you see how that's kind of evidence of the way the brain works? The reason I learn, the reason I spend my whole life trying to anticipate every next part of the sequence that I'm going to observe is because I've built this model that allows me to sit around and explore possible paths. So when we studied, say, uniform cost search, you're exploring a possible path, right? You're saying, what if I go left, and then what if I go up, and then what if I go right, and then what if I go down? But if you had actually connected your awareness to your mind while you're exploring this path, you would see yourself going through dumb paths. And why would you do that? Because you're trying to find the good path. So kind of what I'm claiming is that the reason we learn is so that we can plan. Because if we have a model that's well refined and is able to anticipate what happens, then we can experiment and search for a path through the things that might happen to find the thing that's going to maximize our goal, objectives, priorities, preferences, and so forth. Okay, we've studied a lot of tools that are really good for planning, like these algorithms and utility theory and all of that, but we haven't studied a lot of algorithms that are really good for learning yet. We briefly used a neural net. A decision tree is really focused on learning because we give it a big pile of data, and it's going to sort through that data and produce a model, which in this case is a decision tree, a tree, and the model can presumably make meaning out of it such that when we give it more information, it can discern the corresponding labels. So neural nets take inputs and produce outputs, so do decision trees. That's very different than what uniform cost search or A* does, right? Okay. That doesn't mean there's only one way to use a neural net or a decision tree. It just means that at a high level, I'm seeing things naturally fall into these buckets, and I wanted to point that out. By the way, there are lots of other models here. Let's see, support vector machines. Naive Bayes is a popular one. Has anybody heard of k-nearest neighbor models? These are all supervised learning models, which are used in the context of learning. And in fact, before I give you the impression that supervised learning is all there is, there's really kind of there's two major camps inside of the learning branch of AI. The first one is called supervised learning, and that's the one that we're studying right now. And the idea of supervised learning is this. I'm going to provide you a bunch of data, and that data contains features and labels. So features are the inputs. Here's a bunch of example inputs and the corresponding outputs that I want. And all of these different types of models can look at that data and figure out how to map from, okay, if I get these inputs, I get those outputs. If I get these inputs, I get those outputs. And then you give it new inputs, and it says, aha, I know those. And this is called supervised learning. Do you get what supervised learning is? Supervised learning is more like the mom holds up a picture of a pig and says, pig. And then the mom holds up a picture of a cow and says, cow. And then the mom holds up a picture of the pig, and what does the kid say? Pig. Yeah, cow if it's a dumb kid. Okay, I shouldn't say that. There are no dumb kids, they're just uneducated kids. Supervised learning is when you hold up example inputs and outputs and you try to map from the inputs to the outputs. What do you suppose is the other type of learning? Unsupervised learning. This one is more of a mystery. Now, it's not a big mystery, but it's more of a mystery. And we'll talk more about this as time goes on. Unsupervised learning is how we learn when we don't have a teacher. So how do you learn when you don't have a teacher? Trial and error, instance, yeah. Kind of what I described a minute ago is, you see how we're trying to predict every sequence that happens in our lives? That's unsupervised learning because nobody's telling us what it means. If you lived in a world where nobody told you that the pig says oink, could you learn what the pig says? Sure.
It wouldn't arrive at oink.
Well, yeah, it probably wouldn't be oink. It would probably be wee, wee. Could you ever know that it was called a pig?
No.
I'm going to say that's a societal convention, right? Terms are just defined by what... There's no true definition of any word. I think that's pretty much true. Definitions exist for only one reason, so we can communicate, and they're made up. So unless somebody taught you through supervised learning, you would never know words. And we do know words, therefore we must use supervised learning in our brains. Do you agree?
Yeah.
And yet, there are things we know without anybody ever telling us, so we must do unsupervised learning in our brains. I think you kind of need unsupervised learning so that you can do supervised learning. Humans need to be able to relate to each, they need to have common experiences so that we can turn our terms into meaningful concepts, so we can express things to each other. There's a lot of interaction there. Here's kind of how I see it. Imagine that we have observations in the world, observations, and this feeds into our brain. We'll say this is our brain. Primary thing that we go into first is unsupervised learning. In some way, we need to take all of this and develop this ability to predict what's coming next. And I kind of think that unsupervised learning in our mind is probably used for some sort of sequence prediction, or we're trying to learn, what happens next, and we can do that without any kind of labels. But before we can give meaning to it, there needs to be some kind of supervised learning. That information probably comes from a teacher of some sort, which gives meaning to the sequences that we piece together. And then somehow we use all of this in some type of a planning system, or utility maximization, or decision making, or however we want to do it. And somehow that feeds into some kind of decisions or actions which ultimately affect the world, from which we gain observations. And you see how there's kind of a loop there. And really all I'm saying is somewhere in our brains there's really a couple of different parts. There's a learning aspect and a planning aspect. Oh, and I guess in order to plan, we better have priorities, right? And where do those priorities come from? Maybe from our teachers or our experiences, or maybe we refine them ourselves. I don't know. But there's kind of all of these aspects of unsupervised learning and supervised learning and planning and priorities are all interacting with each other. And the learning seems to take the observations first, and the planning is a little closer to the actions. And this all fits together nicely into some kind of a general agent model. And this must be what happens in your head to some extent. Actually, that's a really good point, and we got to stick that in. So by instinct, we're saying what? DNA, pre-programmed stuff? Let me just throw it back at you. Where do you think that, how do we use instinct? Does that allow us to make sense of our world? Does it shape our priorities? I think we definitely have instinctual priorities, because if you yell around a baby, they're offended, right? Often. They get desensitized pretty quickly, but I think they know anger is bad immediately, so that's probably instinctual.
Yeah,
do you instinctually know how to plan? I think you do, at least for basic necessities like sucking and crying. I mean, every child knows how to cry. You don't have to teach that. You certainly don't have to learn how to make your heart beat, because if you do, well, you're already dead. So that one's got to be instinct. Very good points. And yeah, as we start to break this down, how do we know if we've done it right? That's the thing, we don't, because we don't have a teacher that's supervising us as we're trying to figure out AI, because it hasn't been done yet. So in a sense, trying to figure out AI itself is sort of an unsupervised approach. And when we finally get the right architecture and we code it up and it works, that'll provide the feedback we need. So that's its own reinforcement, you might say. That's going to tell us when we've got it right. I find this concept of trying to break down intelligence and figure out which parts go where very fascinating and a very fun thing to do. I hope as we're studying these different techniques, as we cover all these different tools, you'll try to figure out in your heads where these tools plug into the grand scheme of things, because I don't think it'll be that long before we start having machines that do all of these different aspects of thinking and of cognition. And when we study decision trees, I hope you'll see that it's not just a, hey, look, it can take this data and predict these corresponding labels, but I hope you'll see that's a meaningful thing that plugs somewhere into the hierarchy of intelligence. So that's why I went over this, and the reason I say it's a learning mechanism is not because it necessarily learns per se, but more because it takes a bunch of data and it makes meaning out of that data, turns meaning in data into information and into meaning.